In the vast and cold grasslands of Mongolia, where endless plains stretch beyond the horizon and powerful winds sweep across the land, a boy was born who would one day change the course of world history. This boy was Genghis Khan. He was not born into luxury or comfort. In fact, his early life was filled with hardship, danger, and struggle. At the time of his birth around 1162, the Mongolian steppe was not united under one ruler. Instead, it was divided among many different tribes who constantly fought with one another. These tribes lived as nomads. They traveled across the grasslands with their horses, sheep, and cattle, searching for food and safe places to camp. Life in this environment was extremely difficult. Winters were brutally cold, summers could be harsh and dry, and conflicts between tribes were common. The boy who would later become Genghis Khan was originally named Temujin. His father was Yasugei, a respected leader of the Borjigin clan. Yasugei was a brave warrior and a powerful tribal chief. From a young age, Temujin grew up watching the life of warriors, hunters, and horse riders. The Mongol people were famous for their incredible horse riding skills. Children learned to ride horses almost as soon as they could walk. Temujin was no different. Even as a small boy, he spent much of his time riding across the open plains, learning how to survive in the wild lands of Mongolia. But the peaceful moments of childhood would not last long. A tragedy was waiting that would change Temujin's life forever. Section 2, Betrayal and the Struggle for Survival. When Temujin was about 9 years old, his father Yasugei decided it was time for his son to be promised in marriage. In Mongol culture, it was common for families to arrange marriages while children were still young. Yasugei took Temujin to visit another tribe so that he could meet a young girl named Borte, who would later become his wife. After leaving Temujin with Borte's family, Yasugei began his journey back home. But on his way, something terrible happened. Yasugei encountered members of a rival tribe known as the Tatars. The Tatars recognized him and secretly poisoned his food. Yasugei managed to return home, but he soon died from the poison. With the death of Temujin's father, everything changed. Without a strong leader, Temujin's family lost their protection and power. The tribe abandoned them. Temujin, his mother, and his siblings were left alone in the harsh Mongolian wilderness. Life became extremely difficult. They struggled to find food and often survived on wild plants, roots, and small animals. Hunger, cold weather, and danger surrounded them. But these hardships made Temujin stronger. Instead of breaking his spirit, the struggle taught him how to survive, how to fight, and how to endure pain. These lessons would shape him into the powerful leader he would later become. Section 3, A Young Warrior's First Conflict. As Temujin grew older, conflicts within his own family began to appear. Life in the wilderness was extremely hard, and survival sometimes forced people to make desperate choices. At one point, a serious dispute broke out between Temujin and his older half-brother. The conflict was about food and leadership within the small family group. This moment would become one of the darkest events in Temujin's early life. Driven by anger and the pressure of survival, Temujin and his brother decided to take drastic action. This tragic event showed how brutal life on the Mongolian steppe could be. But it also revealed something important about Temujin's character. He was willing to do whatever it took to survive. This harsh reality shaped the future conqueror of the Mongol Empire. Section 4, Capture and Escape. As Temujin grew into a teenager, he faced another dangerous challenge. A rival tribe called the Tayikyid captured him. According to legend, he hid in a river and used the darkness to avoid being seen. A sympathetic family eventually helped him escape completely. This moment proved something important. Temujin was not only brave, he was incredibly determined. No matter how difficult the situation became, he would always fight for freedom. Section 5, The Beginning of a Great Leader. After escaping captivity, Temujin slowly began gathering allies. Some were old friends of his father. Others were young warriors who admired his courage and leadership. One of his most important allies was Jamuka. Together they began building a small but loyal group of followers. At the same time, Temujin reunited with Borte, the woman he had been promised to marry years earlier. Their marriage strengthened his alliances and gave him more support among the tribes. Slowly but surely, Temujin began rising as a leader among the Mongol tribes. But his journey to becoming Genghis Khan, ruler of the greatest land empire in history, had only just begun. Many battles, betrayals, and epic conquests still lay ahead. After surviving betrayal, hunger, and captivity, Genghis Khan, who was still known as Temujin at that time, began slowly rebuilding his life on the vast steppes of Mongolia. The Mongolian steppes were harsh and unforgiving, but they were also a land of opportunity for those strong enough to lead. Temujin understood something that many tribal leaders did not. He realized that loyalty was more powerful than family bloodlines. In traditional Mongol society, tribes were organized around family clans. Leaders usually gave important positions only to relatives. Temujin chose a different path. Instead of promoting people based on family ties, he promoted warriors based on loyalty, courage, and ability. This decision made him very popular among common warriors. Many young fighters who had little status in other tribes joined Temujin's growing army. Slowly, his influence began spreading across the steppe. But Temujin knew that building alliances was just as important as winning battles. And one of the most important alliances of his early life came from a powerful leader named Togrul. Section 2, Alliance with Togrul. Temujin remembered that his father had once been a close friend of Togrul, the powerful ruler of the Karait tribe. Seeking support, Temujin traveled to meet him. When Temujin arrived at Togrul's camp, he brought gifts and reminded the old leader of his father's friendship. Togrul welcomed him warmly. In fact, he treated Temujin almost like a son. This alliance gave Temujin something extremely valuable: protection and military support. With Togrul's help, Temujin began strengthening his position among the Mongol tribes. Around the same time, Temujin reunited with his childhood friend Jamuka. Jamuka was also an ambitious and powerful warrior. At first, the two friends became sworn brothers, promising loyalty to each other. Together they gathered warriors and began expanding their influence. But this alliance would not last forever. Soon, rivalry and ambition would turn these friends into bitter enemies. Section 3, The Kidnapping of Borte. During this period, Temujin faced another devastating challenge. His wife Borte was kidnapped by a rival tribe called the Merkits. This tribe had long been enemies of Temujin's family. The kidnapping was not just a personal tragedy. It was also a serious political insult. Temujin knew he could not rescue Borte alone. So he asked for help from Togrul and Jamuka. Together, their combined forces launched a surprise attack on the Merkit tribe. The battle was swift and brutal. The Merkit warriors were defeated, and Borte was rescued. This victory greatly increased Temujin's reputation. Warriors across the steppe began seeing him as a rising leader capable of defeating powerful enemies. However, success also created tension between Temujin and Jamuka. Their visions of leadership were very different. Jamuka believed in traditional aristocratic leadership where noble families ruled over common people. Temujin believed in promoting warriors based on loyalty and ability. This difference would soon lead to conflict. Section 4, The Rivalry with Jamuka. Eventually, the friendship between Temujin and Jamuka collapsed. Jamuka declared himself the leader of a rival coalition of tribes. A great conflict began between the two former friends. Jamuka's army included many noble tribal leaders who feared Temujin's growing influence. Temujin's army, on the other hand, was filled with loyal warriors from humble backgrounds. The war between them lasted for several years. At times, Temujin suffered defeats. But he also learned valuable lessons about strategy, leadership, and discipline. Unlike many tribal armies, Temujin began organizing his forces into structured military units. He divided his warriors into groups of 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000. This system made his army more organized and effective than any other force on the steppe. Slowly but surely, Temujin's power continued growing. And eventually, the rivalry with Jamukha would reach its final and dramatic conclusion. Section 5, The Birth of Genghis Khan. After many years of war, Temujin finally defeated the last of his major rivals. By the year 1206, he had united most of the Mongol tribes under his leadership. A great council of tribal leaders was held on the Mongolian steppe. At this gathering, Temujin was given a new title. He was declared Genghis Khan, which means universal ruler, or Great Khan. This moment marked the official birth of the Mongol Empire. Under Genghis Khan's leadership, the Mongol tribes were no longer divided. They were united into a powerful military force. But uniting the tribes was only the beginning. Soon, Genghis Khan would lead his armies beyond the Mongolian steppe and begin conquering vast civilizations across Asia. The world was about to witness the rise of one of the most powerful empires in history. In the year 1206, a great gathering of Mongol tribal leaders was held on the vast steppes of Mongolia. During this historic meeting, Temujin was officially given the title Genghis Khan, which means universal ruler, or Great Khan. This moment marked the birth of the powerful Mongol Empire. For the first time, the scattered and often hostile Mongol tribes were united under a single leader. Genghis Khan understood that unity was the key to strength. Instead of allowing tribal rivalries to divide his people, he reorganized the Mongol society and army into a powerful and disciplined structure. His military system was simple but extremely effective. The army was divided into units of 10 soldiers, 100 soldiers, 1,000 soldiers, and 10,000 soldiers. Each unit had a leader who was responsible for discipline, strategy, and communication. This structure made the Mongol army incredibly organized compared to other armies of that time. But organization alone was not enough. The Mongols were also masters of mobility. Every Mongol warrior had several horses, allowing them to travel extremely long distances without exhausting their animals. Their soldiers were also excellent archers who could shoot arrows with deadly accuracy while riding at full speed. With this powerful army ready, Genghis Khan began looking beyond the Mongolian steppe. He was preparing for something much bigger. Conquest. Section 2, The War against the Jin Dynasty. At that time, northern China was ruled by a powerful kingdom known as the Jin Dynasty. This dynasty controlled rich cities, farmland, and strong fortresses. However, Genghis Khan believed that conquering these territories would strengthen his empire and give the Mongols access to valuable resources. In 1211, the Mongol army launched a massive campaign against the Jin Dynasty. The Chinese defenses included strong fortifications and the famous Great Wall of China. But the Mongols were masters of unconventional warfare. Instead of attacking in predictable ways, they used speed, deception, and surprise. Their cavalry could move rapidly across the land, striking enemy forces before they could prepare. Many battles took place across northern China, and gradually the Mongols began gaining control of large territories. This campaign marked the beginning of Mongol expansion into East Asia. It also proved that Genghis Khan's army was capable of defeating powerful and well-established kingdoms. Section 3, The Conflict with the Khwarezmian Empire. After his successes in China, Genghis Khan turned his attention westward. At that time, a powerful state called the Khwarezmian Empire controlled much of Central Asia. Initially, Genghis Khan had no intention of starting a war with this empire. Instead, he wanted to establish trade relations. He sent a caravan of merchants to the Khwarezmian territory to begin peaceful commerce. However, the governor of the city where the caravan arrived accused the merchants of being spies. The governor ordered them to be arrested and executed. This action was a terrible mistake. When the news reached Genghis Khan, he was furious. He considered the killing of his merchants to be a direct insult to the Mongol Empire. At first, he demanded justice and asked the ruler Muhammad II of Khwarezm to punish the governor responsible. But the Khwarezmian ruler refused. This decision triggered one of the most devastating military campaigns in history. Section 4, The Fall of Great Cities. In 1219, Genghis Khan launched a massive invasion of the Khwarezmian Empire. His armies advanced rapidly across Central Asia. They attacked several major cities that were important centers of trade and culture. Among them were the famous cities of Bokhara, Samarkand. Despite their strong defenses, these cities eventually fell to the Mongol armies. The Mongol strategy often involved surrounding cities, cutting off supplies, and using psychological warfare to weaken resistance. Sometimes cities surrendered quickly to avoid destruction. Other times, long sieges took place before Mongol forces finally captured the city. These campaigns demonstrated the terrifying effectiveness of the Mongol military machine. Within just a few years, the powerful Khwarezmian Empire collapsed. Section 5, A Growing World Empire. After defeating the Khwarezmian Empire, the power of Genghis Khan expanded dramatically. The Mongol Empire now controlled vast regions including Central Asia, Iran, Afghanistan. The empire stretched across thousands of miles. Trade routes such as the famous Silk Road became more secure under Mongol control, allowing merchants and travelers to move more safely across Asia. But Genghis Khan's ambitions did not stop there. His generals began exploring new lands to the west, including territories that would later become part of Russia. The Mongol Empire was still expanding. And the world had not yet seen the full power of the Mongol armies. By the early 13th century, the empire created by Genghis Khan had grown into one of the most powerful forces in the world. What had once been a loose collection of tribes living on the grasslands of Mongolia was now a massive empire spreading across Asia. The Mongol army had already conquered huge territories in Central Asia and defeated the powerful Khwarezmian Empire. But Genghis Khan's ambition did not end there. He believed that the Mongol Empire must continue expanding in order to stay strong. His generals were ordered to explore new lands, defeat rival kingdoms, and secure important trade routes. The Mongol army moved quickly across deserts, mountains, and grasslands. Their speed and discipline made them extremely difficult to defeat. Soon, their campaigns reached even more distant regions. Section 2, Campaigns in Persia and Afghanistan. After destroying the Khwarezmian Empire, Mongol armies continued their campaigns into Persia and Afghanistan. These regions were home to wealthy cities and important trade centers along the Silk Road. However, many rulers resisted Mongol control. When cities refused to surrender, Mongol forces laid siege to them. Some of the most famous cities affected during these campaigns included Nishapur, Merv. These cities had once been great centers of culture and learning. But the Mongol invasions brought massive destruction. Despite their reputation for harsh warfare, the Mongols also introduced new systems of communication and administration in the territories they controlled. Trade routes became safer, and merchants were able to travel long distances under Mongol protection. This helped revive commerce along the Silk Road, while Genghis Khan continued consolidating power in Asia. Some of his greatest generals began exploring lands far to the west. Among the most famous Mongol commanders were Subutai and Jebe. These generals led daring expeditions across vast territories. Their armies. By the early 13th century, the empire created by Genghis Khan had grown into one of the most powerful forces in the world. What had once been a loose collection of tribes living on the grasslands of Mongolia was now a massive empire spreading across Asia. The Mongol army had already conquered huge territories in Central Asia and defeated the powerful Khwarezmian Empire. But Genghis Khan's ambition did not end there. He believed that the Mongol Empire must continue expanding in order to stay strong. His generals were ordered to explore new lands, defeat rival kingdoms, and secure important trade routes. The Mongol army moved quickly across deserts, mountains, and grasslands. Their speed and discipline made them extremely difficult to defeat. Soon, their campaigns reached even more distant regions. Section 2, Campaigns in Persia and Afghanistan. After destroying the Khwarezmian Empire, Mongol armies continued their campaigns into Persia and Afghanistan. These regions were home to wealthy cities and important trade centers along the Silk Road. However, many rulers resisted Mongol control. When cities refused to surrender, Mongol forces laid siege to them. Some of the most famous cities affected during these campaigns included Nishapur, Merv. These cities had once been great centers of culture and learning. But the Mongol invasions brought massive destruction. Despite their reputation for harsh warfare, the Mongols also introduced new systems of communication and administration in the territories they controlled. Trade routes became safer, and merchants were able to travel long distances under Mongol protection. This helped revive commerce along the Silk Road. While Genghis Khan continued consolidating power in Asia, some of his greatest generals began exploring lands far to the west. Among the most famous Mongol commanders were Subutai and Jebe. These generals led daring expeditions across vast territories. While Genghis Khan continued consolidating power in Asia, some of his greatest generals began exploring lands far to the west. Among the most famous Mongol commanders were Subutai and Jebe. These generals led daring expeditions across vast territories. Their armies traveled through the Caucasus Mountains and into regions that are now part of Russia. During these campaigns, they encountered new enemies, including the princes of the Rus territories. One of the most famous battles during this period was the Battle of the Khalkha River. In this battle, the Mongol army faced a large coalition of Russian and allied forces. The European armies believed they had superior numbers. But the Mongols used their famous strategy of feigned retreat. They pretended to run away, luring the enemy into a long pursuit. After exhausting their opponents, the Mongol forces suddenly turned around and launched a devastating counterattack. The coalition army was completely defeated. This victory shocked many rulers across Europe and Asia. Section 4: The Power of Mongol Strategy. The success of the Mongol armies was not only due to their bravery but also their advanced military strategies. Under the leadership of Genghis Khan, the Mongol army became one of the most organized forces in history. Every soldier followed strict discipline. Commanders communicated using signal flags, horns, and messengers. Before launching an attack, Mongol scouts carefully studied enemy territories. They gathered information about roads, rivers, defenses, and political conflicts within enemy kingdoms. This intelligence allowed Mongol commanders to plan their campaigns with incredible precision. Their enemies were often confused by the speed and coordination of Mongol attacks. Because of this reputation, many cities surrendered without fighting. Fear of the Mongol army spread across continents. By the later years of his life, Genghis Khan had built an empire unlike any seen before. The Mongol Empire stretched across enormous territories from East Asia to Central Asia. Trade routes were protected. Travel between distant regions became easier. Different cultures and ideas began interacting across the empire. But Genghis Khan was now growing older. Although his armies continued fighting new campaigns, the question of what would happen after his death began to emerge. His sons and generals would soon carry forward his legacy. And the Mongol Empire would continue expanding even further. But first, the story of Genghis Khan himself was approaching its final chapter. By the final years of his life, Genghis Khan had already built one of the most powerful empires in human history. The Mongol Empire stretched across enormous territories from the steppes of Mongolia to large parts of Central Asia and Persia. However, Genghis Khan was not a ruler who believed in stopping. Even in his later years, he continued leading military campaigns. One of his final wars was against the Western Xia. This kingdom had once accepted Mongol authority but later rebelled against it. Genghis Khan believed rebellion could not be tolerated. In 1226, he personally led his army on a campaign to punish the Western Xia rulers. Despite his age, he continued commanding his forces with determination. The Mongol army advanced across deserts and mountains, attacking fortified cities and defeating enemy forces. But during this campaign, something unexpected happened. Section 2, The Mysterious Death. In 1227, during the campaign against the Western Xia Kingdom, Genghis Khan suddenly died. The exact cause of his death remains one of history's greatest mysteries. Different stories have been told by historians. Some say he died after falling from his horse during a hunting trip. Others claim he was wounded during battle. There are even legends suggesting secret political events within the Mongol court. However, the true cause has never been confirmed. What is known is that his death was kept secret for some time. The Mongol army continued its campaign until the Western Xia Kingdom was completely defeated. Only after the victory did news of his death begin to spread. Another mystery surrounding Genghis Khan is the location of his burial. According to historical accounts, the Mongols wanted to keep the grave of their great leader completely secret. His body was taken back toward Mongolia for burial. Legend says that the soldiers who carried his coffin killed anyone they encountered along the journey so that no one would discover the burial place. After the funeral, even the soldiers who buried him were supposedly executed to keep the location secret. Some legends claim that thousands of horses were ridden over the burial site to erase all traces. To this day, the exact grave of Genghis Khan has never been discovered. Many historians and archaeologists have searched for it, but the secret remains hidden somewhere in the Mongolian steppe. Section 4, The Empire after his death. Although Genghis Khan died in 1227, his empire did not collapse. Instead, it continued growing even larger. His sons and grandsons expanded the Mongol Empire across new territories. Among his descendants was Kublai Khan, who later became the ruler of Yuan dynasty in China. Under Mongol rule, the empire eventually stretched from East Asia to Eastern Europe. At its height, the Mongol Empire became the largest continuous land empire in world history. The Mongols controlled major trade routes connecting Asia and Europe. This allowed ideas, goods, and cultures to travel across continents. The legacy of Genghis Khan remains complex and powerful even today. To some people, he is remembered as a ruthless conqueror whose wars caused destruction and loss of life. To others, he is remembered as a brilliant leader who united the Mongol tribes and created a powerful empire. His military strategies are still studied by historians and military experts. His empire changed global trade, politics, and cultural exchange across Asia and Europe. Even today, in Mongolia, Genghis Khan is celebrated as a national hero. Statues, monuments, and museums honor his legacy. More than 800 years after his death, his name still remains one of the most famous in world history. From a poor boy struggling to survive on the harsh Mongolian steppe, he rose to become the ruler of one of the greatest empires the world has ever seen. 3.